So, all right, now we're going to get into the topic of the day. Okay. So every week, and every time we come together, I love to just talk a little bit about an intentional topic of the week. So something to help you build your ability to be intentional with your life. And since this is the first time back, I wanted to talk a little bit about my why, because I think understanding your why is so important. So I wanted to share with you guys, well, why in the world did I even start this podcast? Why in the world do I have this whole idea of intentional living? And I'm telling people that you got to be intentional with your time. So I just wanted to break down a little bit of why. So it's so funny. Like, I first started this journey of intentionality, and I didn't even really know that this was going to be a journey. Like, I remember being like late 20s. I actually was part of launching a church, best church ever, still there. And I remember just being so busy. Like, we were doing so much, and it was all welcomed, everything that I wanted to do, right? And then on top of that, I just graduated. I think I just graduated with my master's, got my first real big person job. Adult job. So I'm like taking on projects and feeling like almost like I wasn't supposed to be there, that imposter syndrome. And what else was I doing at that time? Then I was in debt. I still had my grad school debt that I was dealing with. I was just not healthy in how I lived how I ate, how I did all those things. And I felt tired. I felt stretched. I felt just overwhelmed. Like I said, I was in debt. I was running ragged, serving in church. Now I know that's like, what? You actually said that out loud? That you were running ragged in church? Like, you were stressed and tired serving? Isn't that what you're supposed to do? Like, you're supposed to serve? I was working all type of hours, just, and not even because I needed to, not because I was in an environment where that was the culture, because matter of fact, that is not the culture at my job. But I felt like I had to do more. And I realized I was doing all types of things, like all good things, like all of it good. Um, but I wasn't doing it because it was from my heart, or I wasn't doing it because I felt like I was fully called to it, right? Like, yes, I was called to serve. Yes, I was called to do the work that I was doing, but it wasn't based on anything more than my obligation. I was firstborn, or I am firstborn, also first generation immigrant. And I, that whole first thing, you got to be perfect, you got to be on top of everything, right? That was permeating throughout my whole entire life. And I was tired. I felt like I was doing all the things, but yet still not happy, still not really feeling like I was fulfilling anything. And I began to really, one, seek God, like, Lord, like, I'm doing all this good, but I don't feel good. Like, I'm doing all this good, but I feel stressed. I feel anxiety. And I began to realize a couple of things. I realized, as I learned a little bit more about God, and as I learned a little bit more about myself, I learned that I felt like I had to prove who I was, or prove my worthiness, right? And I realized that that's not what God desires for any of us. And then I started reading different books about learning how to live by your values, how to live by what's important in your life, and figuring out what you were made to do, how God made you. And I began to see like the patterns in my own life, and began to see that there is so much more. I'm going to my notes because I want to make sure I don't miss nothing. But as I was reading more about purpose, and reading more and understanding what purpose truly is, I realized that I was living outside of that. I realized that I was not living on purpose. and I was not living by my values. And I realized that living by your values is super important. So I began to shift, right? I began to study the word. I began to study a different awesome productivity folks. And I realized through trial and error, through learning, through understanding about focus, to learning about what God says about finances, what God says about living on principle and living by your values, that there was a couple of things that I actually learned from that. Okay. And I want to share these with you. And we'll continue to unpack these different things. You'll see, if you don't follow me already on YouTube, you'll see I have over 300 videos all about different aspects of intentional living. And I talk about that all throughout that. But on this podcast, in these quick 10-minute times I have with you, or 20-minute times that I have with you, I'll be breaking down little things like this. But let me give you the 5 things that I learned on this journey. So 1, purpose. Purpose is not something that's to be found. I actually talk about this in my devotional that I wrote almost 2 years ago. Or is it 3 years now? Listen, I wrote a devotional, okay? Anyway, if you want it, link below. Anyway, but I realized that purpose is not found. Your purpose is actually already found. Your purpose is to give God glory. And the gifts, the tendencies, the quirks, the things that you like to do all point towards how you're going to do it. I was just talking to an old mentee of mine when she was talking about how she's trying to find her purpose in her position and all that kind of stuff. And I had to stop her and let her know that, hey, your purpose is to glorify God. And the way that God made you gives you clues on how it's going to happen. So for instance, for me, I love helping people get to their next step. I love helping people understand that they have a greater purpose. I love helping people get connected and organize their lives around their values, organize their lives with systems to kind of push them forward into the things that they've been called to do. And I realize that I do that now in everything that I do, right? I talked about how I was working in an intense job, working in well, it's intense, but the culture is awesome. Working hard in church, trying to live, trying to have this business. Well, back then I didn't have the business, but all of these things, I'm still doing all of those things. But the difference now is that I'm living by my values. I have the boundaries that I need, and I'm seeing understanding how to navigate and say no when I need to. So I think it's just so important to understand that your purpose is to glorify God. The second thing, oh no, we're almost at 20, so I'm gonna move quick. The second thing is to live intentionally. And how to do that is to acknowledge your gifts and the dreams that God has placed on your heart, building your life around your principles, your values, building systems to execute, and then practicing those systems. That's how you can live intentionally. And I'm gonna talk about that. I call that the stairwell to intentional living. And I'm actually gonna talk about that throughout the next couple of weeks and stuff like that. And then your time on this earth is precious and finite. So you have to focus in and begin to know that your dream is meant to impact. And you're going to see that as you become more intentional with the time that you have. Matter of fact, one of my favorite verses, and you can't really see it, but it's here. I probably try to change my camera angle so you can see it, but it's Psalm 90:12. And it says to teach us how to use all the time that we have wisely, right? And it's not David, but somebody in the Bible is asking the Lord to teach him how to use his time wisely. And earlier in that psalm, the psalmist says that we only have like 70 years, possibly 80. So teach me how to use my time wisely. And then the fourth one is that we are most fulfilled when we know our why and we build our lives around walking that why out daily. And then finally, the journey is worth it. The journey for me was messy. Matter of fact, I'm still journeying, and I think I'm going to continue to journey through understanding what my why really entails until I die. And I actually believe the same for you. But the journey is worth it. So I encourage you to take the time to figure it out. Take the time to ask God, why? Who am I? What did you place in me? And how can I glorify God in that? How can I glorify you in that? Okay. And then, and that's it. Those are the 5. Okay. So I was a chatty Cathy today. We going to hit right at 20 minutes. But I'm just saying this to you right now, that if you're someone who feels like you are spread too thin, you're overwhelmed with all that you do, we're going to have some fun together. We are. We're going to set up our weeks to win, and we're going to have fun while doing it. So I encourage you, follow me on YouTube. Get on my email list. We're going to be talking more about this as the weeks come. And man, I'm excited to be on this podcast journey with y'all. All right.